All right, well, let's get started. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this very special remote campus of California College of the Arts. My name is Nathan Lynch, and I'm the chair of ceramics and also chair of the glass program here at CCA. And this lecture is part of our Viola Frey Distinguished Visiting Artist Series. I, of course, get the distinct pleasure to introduce our guest tonight, Kristen Morgin. Kristen lives and works in Los Angeles. I'll give you a little bit of information about her background. She received a BA in 1993 from Cal State Hayward here in the Bay Area and an MFA in 1997 from Alfred. Kristen has had solo shows at AB Projects, Cuesta College, in San Luis Obispo, Jane Hartswick Gallery in New York, Mark Selwyn in Los Angeles, Salon 94 in New York, the Wattis Institute here at CCA, and Zach Fuhrer in New York. I met Kristen last spring when I had a show at AB Projects run by the very special Nicole Seisler. And I had the good fortune to spend time with Kristen during that visit. I got to go to her studio, and what would I say? I guess after my initial impulse, which was one, frankly, of kind of awe and silence, I guess, I felt really impressed by this combination in the studio of the work that was finished and the work that was unfinished. And I liked how, I don't know if Kristen will like this, but I liked how you couldn't tell what was finished and one unfinished. You also couldn't tell when that decision would be made or how. Part of what we try to do at CCA Ceramics is to find like the most interesting edge of this field, or the most interesting approach to the material. So we try to figure out ways to build our curriculum so that it extends towards maybe towards architecture or painting or archaeology in a way that fosters new approaches in the field and new modes of expression. So we're after this kind of strange and wonderful, strange and magical thing that ceramics can do. And when I look at Kristen's work, I find that strange and wonderful. I guess in this case, the edge is like, feels like this edge between what's there and what's not there, or an edge between like preservation and decay, or something that was heroic that you're holding on to. To me, it feels like at the same time, the work feels like it's full of a kind of attitude and optimism, but also has a great deal of empathy. It's like you can tell there's a clear sense of craftsmanship in the work, and at the same time, it's kind of falling apart, and maybe that's its special magic. Anyway, at the end of the day, it strikes me is the work, there's a lot of different ways into the work. And it seems to me to be very generous in that way, much in the way that Kristen is. So, Kristen, I want to thank you for extending the field in all these special ways that your work does. And just thank you for being here with us tonight. And I'll hand it off to you.
Okay. Thank you. That was a really kind introduction. And thanks. Thank you everybody for coming. Okay, so let's see here. So this is my studio, and I have lived and worked in this warehouse for about 7 years. Oops. I share the space with my best friend Julie and my partner, and she is a marvel in in herself. She's interested in multitude of things. She is an artist. She is a passionate gardener, and she's currently returning to school to learn occupational therapy. But this is our garden, and she basically built this in our parking lot in the back of our warehouse. And we eat a lot of our food from this garden. We share the space also with our 4 to 7 cats. We have 4 cats that live inside with us, and there are, 2 to 3 that come visit us at night that we feed. This is my studio. This picture was taken quite a while ago, and it's not very congested right in this picture, but right now it's pretty congested. So I like piles of stuff, and this kind of cacophony is something that sort of feeds me and excites me. And I kind of set up little workstations in my studio, and I'll work in there until it's a pile and a mess that I can't work with anymore, and then I'll move to another space in my studio. So I have been writing lately about my work, and I've been trying to figure out really what my work is about. And I think for the most part, I'm really interested in making objects. And I'm really interested in telling you a kind of history about the objects. And the way in which I've made objects and the kinds of objects that I've made has sort of changed over the years, but I think those are things that are real consistencies with my work. So as Nathan was saying, I got a graduate or an MFA degree from Alfred University. It's a very traditional school for ceramics. And when I went to school there in 95, 96, and 97, I first started experimenting with unfired clay. And that was something that was particularly difficult to do without criticism at Alfred. But somehow I made it through, and I was really interested in sort of experimenting with unfired clay. I wanted to make these objects that looked kind of like they had been dug up and had been rediscovered. I wanted to tell you about the people who had touched these things or who had used them, and I wanted to give you a kind of an impression of an object. At this point, I was making all of these things out of unfired clay. This work came after my graduate school experience, but I was making things out of unfired clay, and I was kind of making these wooden armatures and these wire structures that sort of made the forms. But all of my work at that time, I would say, and for a long time, kind of looked like it had been dug up, and I was really interested in leaving a lot of vacancies and leaving a kind of impression of an object more so than the accuracy of an object. So this is 7 cellos that I made right around 2000, 2001. It's at that time I had a very close friend of mine who had died, and to be quite honest, I was just really stricken with this particular grief, and I didn't know what to do with it. And so I just sort of put my head down and worked like crazy. I made a ton of work, and I had a show at a small junior college, which very few people saw. And I made way too much work for this show, but these 9 cellos, there were a total of 9 in the series, were part of it. Anyways, later on, these pieces are still made out of unfired clay, and now I sort of paint things with a particular kind of accuracy. And I'm really interested in well, I'm still interested in telling you kind of history of the object. So like this book, for example, has all this spidering so that you know that the book is really old. And these stickers, they come from a certain time period, maybe the 1980s. So you can kind of gather, looking at it, you know, I would put name plates, you know, to somebody, Merry Christmas, Happy Birthday. It's all about creating this kind of narrative about the supposed history of the objects. I am really interested in geeking out over the particular details that I put into my work. And it is quite often that people really miss the details. So I wanted to take this opportunity really to show you, like, I figured out that I could make clay, unfired clay, look like plywood. And so this is unfired clay that has been painted to look like plywood. And all of these little details are things that are sort of put in there. So in that way, the work is really very well crafted, and it sort of connects me to the world of craft. This is a piece that I am currently working on. And in recent years, I've been interested in making these still lives where I'm interested in taking a bunch of different objects and sort of putting them together, taking them out of their original contexts and giving them a new sort of context within this still life. And it's not that far from still life painting. So, this piece has a long way to go. There's a lot in here that are the original objects. So just to make clear, I sort of set up these objects and changed the orientation of them over and over, and then I get something that I like, and then very slowly I'll go back and I'll take out every single object out of this still life, and I'll make it as closely as I can to the real thing, and I'll put it back into the still life. I was really proud of this ABBA record. I recently finished it, and so that again is made out of unfired clay and paint. Things in this little picture here, just to give you some idea, these brownish grayish pieces over here are made out of clay, but I have not painted them yet. I made this little doll, and I made this piece of cardboard. I made this cup, and I made this piece of plywood. I made this little puppet down here and this Donald Duck. But the rest of it are all actual items made out of cardboard, wood, etc. And that eventually I'll make them all. So not only is it about the kind of detail that I put into making things, it's also about the juxtapositions of these things. I'm interested in what happens to the Donald Duck when he's next to a piece of cardboard or this rock or the cassette tape, etc., etc. So this is a piece that I made recently, and I just wanted to show you again, like all this detail. It usually goes unnoticed, and but I really think about the kinds of details that I put into my work, and I try to, you know, I try to make it so ordinary that you will not notice it. So other things that I've done and that I do is I've worked with collage for a long time, and so these collages I made maybe around 2000, something like that, and they were made right around the same time that my friend had died. And I was really interested in ghosts. I really wanted to see my friend's ghost. I didn't see her ghost, but I made these collages instead. And sometimes my work can kind of do that for me. It like can give me things that I can't have. The other thing that I really love about collage is that it sort of clips things from parts of the world and parts of history, and it sort of puts them together in this new context, in this new universe, to make a new place and a new kind of narrative. Collage kind of looked like this for a while with my work. I was making these kind of forms with wire, and I was gluing unfired clay to the surface to make kind of a form, and then within the inside they had these sort of paper cutouts that created a kind of narrative. These particular narratives, I mean, in hindsight, all seem to be about inspiration, more or less. So this is a piece that I made recently, and I've kind of returned to collage when I had to go into quarantine and lockdown. Things didn't really change for me in my studio, but they were weird, and I just couldn't really work the same way that I had before. So I turned to collage, and I did this in a little bit different way, where I would make these kinds of setups, and I would take a photograph. So this one is a magazine, and I've cut a bunch of holes into it to get back down to the snapshot of this rhino, which is a snapshot that I took maybe about 4 years ago. And that rhino was in a zoo in Korea. And gosh, during quarantine, I really think a lot about that rhino, whether or not he's still there. So these are more collages that I made during quarantine. And in some ways, I think they're all about a kind of isolation and being away from things that you would rather be close to. Okay, so things got weirder. And I started drawing my own emojis, and I just post them on Facebook or whatever in place of actual emojis. And I like the randomness of these things. So there's, you know, E.T. and a board with a nail in it, and a can of tuna, Frank the rabbit from Donnie Darko, vampire teeth, a sad rainbow, a meat grinder, and Mr. Potato Head. For years, I have sort of set up these kinds of still lifes in my studio, and these might be ideas for pieces that come later on down the line. So they're kind of like studies in some ways, but a lot of these are just kind of interesting on their own. They're birthday greetings and things like that. Here's my cat. This is the second time you'll see Boo in this presentation. So when I put objects together, sometimes I'm interested in the different kind of narrative that the two objects sort of lend to one another. They sort of expand the story that they're both telling, but sometimes it just doesn't mean anything. So this is one of those pieces. It doesn't really mean anything. I just like the way these particular objects looked on top of one another. And again, the value of the piece is really wrapped up in me lending my skills to try and make these things as accurately as I can. Sometimes I put objects together and they have this sort of uncanny quality about them. When I first began making objects that I owned, I would pair them with the object that I copied. So this book is a book that I made, and this is the book that I owned, and I paired them together in one piece. And I liked the way that they sort of interacted with one another. They seemed kind of like a couple, and they sort of talked with one another back and forth. But also, they seemed like similar things from different universes sort of put together in one place. So this is a piece, again, like I was saying earlier, sometimes my work doesn't really mean anything. I just like the way these objects look together. So this piece, I had made it and I called it Matchbook Hexagon. And then I realized later that the shape in the center is not a hexagon, it's a pentagon. But I liked the sort of arbitrariness of the title, and really, again, to see a matchbook and to try and make it out of unfired clay and paint it with a particular kind of accuracy and precision, that is just a delicious kind of chore for me. And I just wanted to geek out on trying to make these matchbooks. So I wink at people a lot through my work. So for instance, the movie Ghost, if you tell anybody that you're a ceramist, who was born within a certain age, they will bring up the movie Ghost and say, oh, I saw that movie and that scene with Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore. Ironically, that movie came out in the year when I took my very first ceramics class at Cal State Hayward. And I swear to God, every girl that was in that class because of that scene, because Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore. So I'm interested in putting things together, and I put them together sometimes in uncomfortable or funny or provoking kinds of ways. There is a kind of spirit of making things sometimes within my work. I kind of imagine somebody, like with this piece, for instance, you have whatever resources you have some comic books that you're gonna cut up, and you have some cardboard and some bits of things, and you wanna make an American flag, and this is what brings meaning to your life by making these particular kinds of things. So there is almost a third person sometimes within my work who I feel is kind of like trying to create these things, and what happens when they're given their own devices and their own ways of making these things. This is another example of collage and really how I use it currently. I make all of these things. So the stickers are painted on and all of the drawings are sort of, I find them somewhere, but then I redraw them on my piece. The book itself is made out of unfired clay and is painted. And so this one is The Seven Dwarves Meet Gamera. Gamera is here and looks like he has been drawn by a 9-year-old little boy, I would suspect. Maybe a girl, probably. These are some other examples of collage and how it sort of manifests itself in my work currently. So this is Snow White in evening wear, and this is Grumpy Smurf. So I wanted to show you these pieces because they're kind of a precursor to this next piece that I'm going to talk to you about. So in my studio when I'm working, I will have all kinds of things going on. Sometimes I'll be listening to music. Sometimes I'll be listening to podcasts. And a lot of times I will be watching TV. I don't really watch it. I just sort of listen to it. But for a time, I was watching episodes of Friends in my studio, and I became slightly obsessed with the television show. So I thought, why don't I recast or put the Friends characters in different kinds of places? So I created these pieces. This one is the one where Joey and Chandler discover the secret of the old mill. And this one is the one where the super friends meet Smelly Cat. And Smelly Cat is Garfield, and Phoebe is Smurfette, Joey is Superman. Ross and Monica are the Wonder Twins. Rachel is both Wonder Woman and Daphne from Scooby-Doo, and Chandler is SpongeBob. So after thinking about Friends and a few pieces later, I started to think about making a portrait of a person through still life. And I thought I should make a portrait of Jennifer Aniston. People often asked me why I would make a portrait of Jennifer Aniston. And of course, why wouldn't you make a portrait of Jennifer Aniston? I think something that I'm interested in celebrity at least, is being able to see ourselves within this person. And Jennifer Aniston has enough celebrity that you could kind of see yourself in her. You can kind of see her being a down-to-earth person. She's not as special as somebody like Martin Luther King or Malcolm X or Abraham Lincoln, but she is just special enough that you might feel like you have something in common with her. So I had this idea that I would make a fictitious book sale put on by Jennifer Aniston. And just like how you can tell a lot about a person given the kinds of books and things that they have on their bookshelves, this is in that same spirit. And I wanted to tell the story of Jennifer Aniston through books that she was trying to sell at a used book sale. There's a lot where I sort of dive into her personal life. This one, you know, to Jen XOXO Brad, and the tape is The Police, and Can't Stand Losing You, and Be My Girl are songs on the tape. This one, it wouldn't be too hard to sort of, you know, think of it as a love triangle. This might be Jennifer Aniston, and this might be Brad Pitt, and this might be Angelina Jolie. So, and all this stuff, you know, I think that Jennifer Aniston really has a good sense of humor, and I think she would honestly laugh at this, but I imagine that she would have a, you know, a DVD of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and there's all kinds of graffiti on it. And some of the books that I made had something to do with the television show Friends too. The Velveteen Rabbit was featured in an episode of Friends. This is to sort of reflect her sense of humor. I think she is a student of old Hollywood. And again, her kind of sense of humor. I'm told, or I've read at least, that she is a dog person and that she really loves animals. So a lot of the books in the book sale had to do with animals. And so this is how it looked. It was very simple, and it was shown for 4 days at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel in Hollywood. And it was a piece that was a part of an art fair that was there. Because it was in this hotel, it had this kind of performance quality about it that I couldn't have remade anywhere else. There were lots of people at the hotel that were there to see artwork, but there were lots of people at the hotel who were just tourists who were there to see Hollywood. And so there was this great confusion. This is how it looked. It's very simple on, you know, sawhorses. I made these sandwich board signs that were throughout the hotel, and it looked like some janky kind of garage sale, but at the same time, you know, it was in this really opulent hotel. And the books that were on this table, a lot of people had something in common with. They recognized titles, and so there was a lot of people that were able to kind of see themselves within this piece that I enjoyed. To make it even more interesting, Brad Pitt showed up at the art fair, and People magazine got a hold of the fact that he was there at the art fair, and there was a piece there that was called Jennifer Aniston's Used Book Sale. They wrote this article which makes a presumption that they're probably getting back together because he was seen at this art fair. I really don't think that he actually saw my piece, but I liked the kind of theater that it sort of provided. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the things that inspire me. I could do a whole slide presentation on just the things that inspire me, but I'll take you through a couple of them. So Los Angeles, I haven't always lived here, but I really love this place, and it really does inspire me. There's all kinds of magical and weird and strange and lovely and horrible, terrible things here. And it's really this this mix of very lovely things and people versus these tragedies that happen on a daily, and this dichotomy that sort of happens here that I don't think I've experienced anywhere else. I really thought when I moved here that I would never fit in, and I don't, but it happens that Los Angeles is filled with all kinds of people that don't fit in anywhere. So it's nice to be with all of them. I really love cartoons. I've been a lifelong fan of cartoons, and I enjoy how subversive they are. There's also this thing that happens with cartoons when they're turned into parade balloons, or somebody else draws them like kids draw them, or they're transformed into folk art, or they're made into toys. There's sort of a distortion upon distortion, and I love seeing things through multiple filters like that. So these are, I mean, this is more of a motion thing that you need to experience, but finger tutting and dubstep dance are things that really excite me. I love the unexpected geometry that sort of happens with these very simple kinds of movements that people make with their bodies. I find it so exhilarating and exciting. And so, as I was saying earlier, my best friend Julie is a marvel in and of herself. She is an artist and a gardener, and she's currently studying a lot of anatomy classes at the moment. I love telling this story about her, though. We were living in a house for a time, and she needed to make a studio for herself to work in. So she built this kind of shack, and it was built in a driveway, and it was on the other side of our fence that led out to the street. But you could see the roof of the shack over the top of the fence. And right around the time that she had finished building it, our neighbors had said, hey, the city is coming around, and if they can see anything above your fence, they're forcing people to take down structures that are not permanent. So she was really worried that somebody would force her to take down this shack that she had built to be her studio. So she had built it on wheels, so that was lucky, and we pushed it aside so that it was kind of out of the way. And she tried to brainstorm about what she could do to keep the structure in the driveway and still use it for a studio. So we lived in a very suburban kind of area, and she thought, well, if people think that it is a motorhome, nobody will ask me to take it down. If they see a motorhome on the other side of the fence, nobody is going to question it. So she made this kind of facade. This is all made out of styrofoam that she got from the Home Depot, and she painted it to look like an RV. And when you saw it from the street, nobody questioned whether or not we had an RV. They really asked us what kind of mileage we got on that thing, and if we were going to go out camping and stuff like that. So anyway, she's a remarkable person. Other things that I look to inspiration, I visit these weird and out of the way museums all over the country. This were some pictures that I took at the Cockroach Hall of Fame. It was in Plano, Texas when I went to see it, but now I think it is somewhere in Arizona. And it was in a man's extermination shop, and he got his clients to dress up and bejewel dead cockroaches and make these kinds of dioramas for them. So this is Liberace, and this is a play on the cockroach, the Roach Motels, and the motel from Psycho. It's the Com Bates Motel, and this is Mother Bates on the front porch. So of all the things, of all the experiences that I've had in my life, there were really two big things that I can kind of point to that sort of led me to this life of being an artist. When I was 8 years old, I went to Spain, and for the first time in my life, I was exposed to art, and I fell in love with Spanish painters. Francisco Goya, this is his painting called The 3rd of May. This painting just horrified me and excited me, and it was like nothing that I had ever seen in my life. The blood and the drama of it, the horror of it. I was 8 years old. I understood nothing about the Napoleonic Wars, but I really got this painting. I really understood it, and I really wanted to be a painter after I saw Francisco Goya. I made versions of that painting all throughout my life, and I still continue to make versions of it. This is a drawing that I did that was inspired by that painting when I was like 9 years old. And this is a more current piece that is called The 3rd of May Playset, which is based on that painting. So the other thing that happened to me that really excited me and inspired me and had a huge impact on my life was this man. When I went to college at Cal State Hayward, my teacher was Clayton Bailey. And Clayton Bailey had a very P.T. Barnum circus-like approach to art and art making. He was also had a wonderful sense of humor, and he had a very, very straight face. Clayton Bailey taught me that if ever there's a time and place for a practical joke, you should put them in contemporary art. Nobody expects to find them there, and that's where they do their most subversive things. So this is something that he created in the 70s, where he made the skeleton and said that it was a remains of a Bigfoot. He kind of buried it in his backyard and then uncovered it. He had a persona. He was known as Dr. Gladstone, and he would speak with this pseudo-scientific sounding language. It was scientific enough to sound scientific, but it was also a kind of language where you understood that he was sort of pulling your leg. And those are things that I really admired about Clayton Bailey. So my work has forever been on this weird pendulum swing. It's between Francisco Goya and, on the other hand, Clayton Bailey. Some of the my most favorite pieces that I have made are some of my smallest, and they don't really seem to say things that are very important, but I like the intricacies of how they were made, and I like the silliness of their message. So this is I Heart Free Validated Parking. This is called Bitches. The time that I spent to make this piece of cardboard look like cardboard was immense, but the message it has is very simple. And then it's made out of this material that can really fall apart so easily. It's like putting painting an eggshell with gold. It kind of, it doesn't really have a purpose, but it makes this thing all the more precious. This is the Amazing Spider-Man, and this is Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock. This is Snoopy's 100 Years. And this one was called Big Papa. So I've made records now for many years, and I really enjoy making them. They are really hard to keep in the world because it is a panel of unfired clay that is 12 inches by 12 inches, and they can break really easily. So in a way, I really appreciate the fragileness of them and how precious they are. But I also like using the surface as a kind of place to sort of make a painting. And these are a cross between painting and collage and all kinds of different things. And this one is Picasso Bunny, and then this one is Sophia Loren and her woodland friends. This one I made very recently, and I made it mostly because my gallerist was in my home. This was before COVID, and he was looking through my records and my record collection, and he found this Pat Benatar, and he got so excited, and I just liked his excitement and his tone. Oh my God, Pat Benatar, I haven't seen her in years. She's so great. And it was something I wouldn't have expected from him. And I just kind of wanted to create that excitement. This one is called My Best to You, Little Girl Boy, and I had a lot of fun trying to make it look like a very distressed record. So this, again, it doesn't have a lot of meaning other than I was really interested to make the album cover look like it was torn off, and to make all these stickers. I figured out I could make stickers somewhere along the line, and I just painted them on everything. So I was watching the Brady Bunch, and I had this thought that the Bradys looked an awful lot like record album covers in the opening credits. And I wondered what would happen if I recast the characters and actors and actresses on the Brady Bunch with records and entertainers on records and record album covers. So, so this is my version of the Bradys. And I chose entertainers and singers that kind of looked like the actors or actresses, or who reminded me of the characters on the show, or had something in common with them. So, for example, I thought Doris Day looked an awful lot like Carol Brady. Again, with the stickers, this is really prime, right around the time when I figured out that I could paint stickers, and I just painted them on everything. I just loved painting these stickers. They give a kind of history to the object itself, and they let you know what kind of person might have touched this thing. This was Marcia Brady. Marcia Brady on the show was played by an actress named Maureen McCormick. And this album was from a singer named Bambi McCormick. So I like the same last name. But also here, strategically, the stickers are sort of placed in a way. There was an episode on the Brady Bunch where Marcia gets hit in the face with a football and her nose swells up. And so I put these stickers to sort of distort her face and her nose. There's a lot of layering of different ideas and different characters that happened. So for instance, this piece here, this was Greg Brady. Greg Brady on the Brady Bunch had a short-lived music career, and he was known as Johnny Bravo. And Johnny Bravo kind of looked like John Travolta on this Staying Alive album. But as I was painting John Travolta and the headband and all the sweat and everything, he started to look to me or remind me of Rambo. So I liked having Rambo and John Travolta, Greg Brady, and Johnny Bravo all in the same place at the same time. These sort of weird interactions of all these characters. So finally, if you know anything about my work or if you've seen my work, you've probably seen pictures of these cars that I've made. I made a total of 6 cars. The smallest car was a child's pedal car, and the largest was a Cadillac hearse. And at the time, I was interested in making objects look like they had quite a life, like that I wanted to make them look like they were about to fall apart, but yet were still there in front of you. Of all the cars that I made, this was really one of my favorites, and this was a lowrider. I was pretty obscure as an artist before I made this work and certainly before I showed it. And it was shown at the Hammer Museum in 2005. I hadn't made it before it was curated into the Thing show, but I intentionally made a car that had ties with Los Angeles. So lowriders certainly are part of Los Angeles culture. But I also wanted to make a car that specifically tied in with Los Angeles. So James Dean in the movie Rebel Without a Cause, which is also a very Los Angeles kind of movie, he drives a 49 or maybe 51 Mercury, and this Mercury is based on the years between 49 and 51-ish. So those were the things that I was thinking about. A lot of times when I made these cars, I didn't own a car. I think I might have had a truck when I made this car, but I don't really like cars and I don't like driving. But a lot of my reasoning in making them is car culture is a part of California culture, and it's a part of our culture that I feel left out of because I don't really feel like I have a lot in common with. So in order to figure out or to learn parts of our culture or different cultures that I don't understand, I make these things for myself. And so that's kind of my ideas behind these cars. This was the second car that I made. It was a Fiat Cinquecento, and it was based on this Italian Fiat. They nicknamed it Topolino, which means little mouse. And they called it that because it could kind of dart around through the narrow alleyways of Italy. But I mostly liked it because it was kind of middle class, and I wanted to pair it with something that was kind of high class, but make them both in this sort of decrepit state, and to kind of put them on a level playing field. So this piano was made, and it was based on a description that I had read of a piano that Beethoven had owned. I think his piano is in much better condition than mine is in, but that's kind of where the design sort of came from. After that work, I kind of ventured off into these sort of carousel animals and caricatures, cartoons. And I liked making these cartoons in the same kind of like, as though it were some kind of artifact from a long distant time. Falling apart, it still expressed a certain kind of strength and goofiness, but it also had this sort of history behind it. I had made a bunch of carousel parts. I had imagined making a carousel, and Popeye was going to be on it, and a bunch of horses and lions and all kinds of animals. And I made a couple of pieces, but I sold them almost immediately. And I didn't really care to continue to make the carousel. But I wanted to change my work. I really didn't want to make unfired clay cars for the rest of my career. I had some money. I had won a grant at that time. I was on a sabbatical from teaching. And so for lack of better things to make, I had a Monopoly game in my studio, and I decided that I would make that. I made this around 2006. Now, it's obvious that these pieces are made out of clay, and later that will sort of diminish, and the pieces that I will make will look not like clay. But this piece was really about putting a Monopoly game through my filter of making things out of unfired clay. It was the first time I really started using color. It was the first time I painted unfired clay, and I painstakingly tried to draw and all of the detail on all of the cards and the board game and so on and so forth. And that was something that I continue to do through today. I've made other game boards, so this one was my second favorite. I took two games. I took the game Sorry, and I took Candyland, and I put them together to make Sorryland. And I didn't invent a way to play it, but I just gave you different things that sort of have to do with sinning and being absolved of your sins and saying you're sorry. So still lives are very important, and I wanted to show you still lives. When I first began studying art, I was really interested in drawing and painting and cartooning, and I sort of became interested in ceramics later, and that sort of took the forefront. But painting and drawing has also sort of come back into my life, and these still lives really have a lot to do with still life painting. So this is one of my very favorite still lifes that I made. It is called Heart and Soul, or the Garden of Earthly Delights. So this part is the Garden of Earthly Delights. In painting, there's something called the golden triangle. So there's a lot of triangles in here. There's this sort of triad between this toy piano, Charlie Chaplin, and this little toy puppet. And then the chair itself sort of goes up and makes another triangle. And there's all kinds of triangles in there. So I really am referencing painting. The heart and soul part of it comes from this little toy piano, and there's a little Mary and a Joseph, and they're sitting sort of shoulder to shoulder, and they look as though they're playing that tune, Heart and Soul. And then the central part of it comes from the Hieronymus Bosch painting called the Garden of Earthly Delights. And the painting has this very benign title where you feel like it's innocent, it's going to be a garden, but as you get close to it, there's a lot of very perverted, disturbing things that are happening in this garden. And so likewise, from a distance, this mess of things looks like very innocent toys, but as you get closer, there might be some discomfort in the way they're sort of interacting with one another. There's this thing that happens in my work a lot where people look at it and they will ask me, is that real? Is that real? Did you make that? Is this real? Is that real? All of the things that I make are real, but I've been asked that question so frequently that I feel like that the things that I make belong to this other reality. So in still lifes like these, there are two realities that are sort of brushing up against one another, and it makes this really uneasy quality where these two different realities sort of create this new place, this new strange universe. At least that's the way I see it. It sounds very science fiction, but yeah. So with still lives, these are sketches, and this is how they sort of happen in my studio. I sort of take a bunch of materials and I rearrange them and take pictures. And then once I get something that I like, I will take all the pieces out of the still life and I will slowly make them and put them back. So these were just sketches. They just ended up being sketches. They haven't gone anywhere yet. But this is a Philip break. That's my cat, Philip. He just had a birthday. Of all of the work that I've made, some of the pieces that I'm most proud of and that I have the worst pictures of are pieces that I have given away as gifts. I think your mind really changes when you make gifts for people and when you have certain people in mind when you're making something for them. All of the worry that you have about art, the things that you worry about, like it's not good enough, it's not smart enough, it's not art enough, it's too craft, it's all of those considerations go away when you're making a gift for somebody. And then it really becomes about making somebody feel a particular kind of delight and a particular kind of ease in having to live with this thing. And if my work can do anything, I'm happy that it gives people that kind of ease and lets them know that at least I cared about them and that I thought of them for a moment. I go way off the rails sometimes and make things that are not like the other things that I make. I made this, ironically enough, right before the 2016 election. I'm not political or anything like that, but I felt like at that time that I really needed a hero or an anti-hero. And the first thing that I thought of was one of these parade balloons. Even if it was filled with hot air, I wanted to have this kind of hero. So I drew this large drawing of Underdog on Post-it notes. My work does this thing where it plays with the kind of value. You know, does the drawing become more valuable if it's big, if it's on archival paper, if it's made with important materials like oil paint, or less important materials like pencil on Post-it notes, you know? So I made this drawing, and then I showed it with this little oscillating fan, and it could only blow the bottom Post-it notes. But I liked how it was, you know, sort of trying its hardest to sort of blow the whole thing away, and it's sort of inflating and deflating at the same time. So these are some last things that I'll show you. These are 2 yellow books about fish. I made these couples. They ended up being, most of them were books that were coupled, but I wanted to couple objects that were sort of oddly paired with one another. So this is a rock in a hard place. And this last one, I think, has, well, you know what New Kids on the Block, hanging tough, and there goes my everything. So, that is the end of my talk, I think. Unless you want to see a puppet show. Are there votes for a puppet show?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, I'll show you a puppet show. This is by no means is this polished. However, let's see if I can get back to my screen.
Oh, look at that.
Let's see here. How do I do this?
Oh.
Let me try to share screen again. Well, oh yeah, I know. I think I have to get out of this first. Okay. So during the whole COVID thing, I started writing these children's stories or nursery rhymes, and they sort of imagine the world without certain letters of the alphabet. These are in no way meant for children, I don't think. They're really dark, and but anyways, so I turned some of them into these kinds of puppet shows, and so I'll show you one of these puppet show sort of dramatic readings of one. This is my favorite one that I wrote, and it's called Without Jays. So let me see if I can get it to play. Okay, wait. Let's see here. Okay, so I made the puppet too, just so you know. There will be apple pie. We will have birds in our skies. We will have cheese. We will have Disneyland. There will be earwax for everyone, and fingers and goodness. There will be hope, and there will be ice cream, but no jumping rope. There will be plenty of kisses and lawyers and music, but it will be a joyless, jokeless, and jelly beanless world without the letter J. Such a likable letter, an uppercase T with a hook, a lowercase I with a monkey's tail. Don't think you will be unjaded by the hijacking of the letter J. You will be jonesing for a J in no time. Our world will have its share of noodles and nuns, outlaws, oak trees, and peacocks. Pleasantries and penalties. We will have queens and quaaludes, rare and raging rhinos, radiant rhododendrons, and all 7 seas. But sadly, our years will hardly be whole without January, June, and July. Romeo will be forever lost without his Juliet. What will become of Tom without Jerry? Jack and Jill went up the hill, never to be heard from again. All the Joes must go, all the Johns will be gone. All the Janes, Plain, Doe, and Mary will go out with January. But we will have tea and tubas, time and tic-tac-toe. We will have turtle doves on our tombstones and partridges in our pear trees. We will have umbrellas, underwear, and unicorns. It will be a utopia for everyone except for the letter J. We will have violets, violins, and vampires. Though the vampires are violent, the incessant biting of our jugulars is not nearly as sad as Halloween without jack-o'-lanterns, gambling without jackpots, or all the little yellow jackets sent out with light windbreakers instead. There will be shortages of jackknives, jerks, jackasses, and bullfrogs named Jeremiah. Giraffes will no longer be named Jeffrey. It will break my heart when the Julies depart. It would hurt far less to pluck the whiskers from kittens or to cut off my nose and eyelashes. There will be no more jogging through the jacarandas on June nights in Jerusalem. The Jannas and Joannas will no longer make jelly. Truth be told, our world just won't be right without its Jennifers. No Anistons, Hudsons, or Grays. No Love Hewitts, no Jason Lees. Goodbye, Miss Jenny from the block. Goodbye, Miss Lawrence. Good luck finding a junkyard in Jersey, a juniper tree on Jupiter, jambalaya in Japan, or a cup of joe in Juneau. Jamaica will be in jeopardy, Java will be jinxed, and beware of all jasmine that jive talks. We will have whats, wheres, and whos. We will have whales and wintertime and watermelon. We will be like jumbled bags of bones without joints to move around. Our bellies will not be jiggly. Our jaws will no longer jabber. Our peaches will not be juicy, and we will have no jugs to contain our whiskey. We will have Roger and Xmas, but they will not be jolly. We will have X-ray vision, Xerox machines, and Generation X, but the jig is up for the letter J. Put down your trombones, there will be none of that jazz. We will have all things yin and yang. We will have all things yam and yolk. We will have yards of yarn and years of yearning. Yet there will not be a single jar of jam in all the world or a jellyfish in the sea. Our June bugs and jailbirds will finally fly away. We will have plenty of zeros and zeds. There will be a zig for every zag. But our jetliners, jacuzzis, jockeys, jungles, and juniors will all go the way of the janitors. Jolene, Jesse's girl, and Johnny Be Good were last seen in a Jaguar, taking a joyride and singing joy to the world. James Dean, Janet Jackson, Janis Joplin, and Jesse James all took the J train out of town. And on Judgment Day, Judas and Jesus drank mint juleps near a silent jukebox, all the while humming, just the two of us. Okay. All right, that's it.
Hey, good job.
Thanks.
Okay, let's see.
Hi, Matt.
Anybody have a question? Thanks, Kristen. First of all, thank you. It was really inspirational, to say the least.
Good.
Are there any questions out there that somebody wants to ask? Carla, do you want to ask that yourself? If not, I will read it here. Okay, this is question number 1 from Carla. Your work is filled with humor and filled with clay replicas, classic cartoons, comics, and other realistic objects. Are you inspired by any artists, or are you just drawn to the history of these items? Part 2 is, why the transition into ceramics? What made you change medium?
Yeah, there's lots of artists I like. I mentioned Francisco Goya. He's one of my favorites, and certainly Clayton Bailey were big influences on me. I really have been excited by Philip Guston. There's an awful lot of folk art that I really like as well, and that I'm just a huge fan of. Henry Darger, you know, every time somebody asks you who your favorite artists are, you only think of the tip of the iceberg. So there's a lot there. So I do look at a lot of artists, and I do refer to them. Certainly Hieronymus Bosch is referred to in my work, and Goya, but I've also referred to other famous or works of art or things that I've seen that have inspired me. And as far as the transition into clay, it was kind of, you know, it's kind of accidental. When I first started studying art in college, I had my heart set on becoming a painter. I really didn't feel like I was intellectual enough to be a painter, though. And so when I really first started college, I tried to work towards becoming a cartoonist. I thought I could do that. Because I do have a sense of humor, and it's dry a lot of times. So for a time, a very short while, I was a cartoonist and I worked on a college newspaper. And I really kind of thought that was the direction I was going to go. But then later on, I took more drawing and painting classes, and I just discovered, like, intellect is one way to make a painting, but you can make a painting from your toes or from your gut or from your, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be so cerebral. So I wanted to become a painter, and I went off to several other schools, and I found myself at Cal State Hayward, and I had to take a ceramics class or a sculpture class, and I took a class with Clayton Bailey, and I think I just really liked working with Clayton, mostly because he never told me no to anything that I wanted to do. If I wanted to build a bonfire in the back and do some kind of crude pit firing that I had no idea of doing, he was all for it. And he didn't care. And so he was really just like, experiment as much as you want. This is your studio. Like, and I continued to make ceramics. When I went off to graduate school, I really applied to schools that would give me some kind of tuition money. And I wanted to go to a school in a state that I had never been to before. So Alfred seemed like a good school. I had never heard of it before I applied there, and I wasn't aware of its reputation. And which is a good thing, because I probably wouldn't have gone there had I known any better. And so I ended up at school in Alfred, and when I got there, I started showing my drawings and paintings, and they were kind of like, well, it's nice that you can draw and paint, but you're here to do ceramics, and you shouldn't bring those up in a critique ever again. And so I kind of, I shut it down. I was like, that's fine. I don't have to do that for 2 years, you know, and I kept drawing and painting kind of private, whereas I put sculpture out into the world. So when I went out, you know, as a full-fledged artist with my MFA or whatever, I just had this feeling like drawing and painting was something I kept personal and private to myself. I could draw whatever I wanted. I could color in coloring books if I wanted, and it was tremendously freeing. And sculpture was the things that I would put in front of me. So like I could kind of, you know, sculpture would be the serious stuff, and drawing and painting would be whatever I wanted it to be. But eventually they could both kind of started to sort of merge with one another. I think I always wanted to get them to kind of live together. And I got them to, you know, I got them to sort of live with one another, but they never really committed. And so it's sort of, you know, one takes precedent over the other, and it's sort of a back and forth thing all the time. But they're both, I think, very much a part of my work. And I oftentimes think of myself more as a painter than I am a sculptor or a ceramicist. But there's other times when I feel like craft plays a very heavy part in the way that I think about making art, is rooted in these sort of craft ideas and ways of making things. I like making pretty things. So. Hey, Peter. Hmm?
Toria says, how do you deal with the fragility of the unfired clay? Do things break? Do you fix them or start over?
Yeah, things break a lot. All kinds of people break my work, including myself, art handlers and people who know better and people who don't know better all break my work. I've had work broken by housekeepers in collectors' homes who didn't know that it was a real book and stacked a pile of magazines on top of it to straighten up. And so everything is just sort of like, what happens when things break is I get a call from my gallerist or something like that, and he says, can you take a look at it? Can you fix it? And then I look at it, and in most cases I've been able to fix things, and I just do it the best way I can. That over years of working with this material seems logical, like a little bit of glue. I'm no conservator, and there are amazing conservators. I have some of my work at the Smithsonian, and there are amazing conservators who work there who are referring to ancient cuneiform in order to deal with the fragility of my work. And they want to know every single material I might have painted with, or every single kind of pen I might have used, or every kind of clay. And then they run this whole battery of tests, and they want to make repairs that they can both undo in 100 years, and they want to make changes to the pieces that are distinguishable from anything that I might have done. So in a lot of cases I had repaired things, and they had to show me the piece and certain cracks. And they said, this is a crack. It looks like there's a repair there. Do you want that crack to stay there, or do you want it to go away? And they kind of had to okay everything with me before they were able to go forward. So and anyways, back to how I fix things, just the best way I can. There's been some instances when I really can't fix things, and on rare occasions, maybe once or twice, I've actually remade the piece over again, which it's interesting to kind of make your pieces more than once. I do that with still lifes, where I have little things that I put in them that I remake all the time just because I like the object. And it changes a little bit every time, but to actually remake something that you've already made and try and follow your own footsteps is just an interesting exercise. So yeah, so that's how things get repaired. I feel like the fragility of the work is very much a part of it. It kind of what gives the work its sort of poetry. It's again like putting jewels on an eggshell. I go through a great deal of trouble to make these things look ordinary, or to make them not look like I made them. And I expend a lot of my skill in order to do that. So a lot of the value of the work is all wrapped up in my skill. And then it brings to question, like what makes an object precious? Is it the material that it's made of? And if something is made of a material that might break down, does that make it more precious because it might not have a very long lifespan? Or does that make it less precious because it's made out of dirt? you know, so so those are things that I think about a lot.
Anybody out there have a question? Arthur says, why is fragility so important? Do you think that fired works look uninteresting? Do you add anything to your clay body like fiber, paper, etc.?
Again, the unfired clay, the fragility is sort of, I like the way that it looks, but I also like the fact that it is so fragile. It just, to me, it makes it really kind of this sort of precious, rare thing. I don't have anything against fired ceramics. In fact, there's an awful lot of ceramic art that I love, and you know, art is dear to me. I just haven't found I mean, and from time to time I do actually fire and glaze things, and but this is just how I've chosen to make my work. Like I said, I make things out of all different materials from time to time. I make collage, or I'll take pictures, or I'll draw drawings on Post-it notes. That's all considered, by me at least, to be my art. And it's all like, it's all the same to me. So, yeah, I think it really boils down to the fact that I like these very simple materials like clay and paint, and they're doing something slightly miraculous.
Lauren asks, you mentioned clutter earlier. Can you discuss how it speaks to the life and history of objects and is involved in your process?
Well, I think it's involved in my process because I'm just a very cluttered kind of worker person. There's a lot of people that have a cluttered studio, but they have a very neat home life, and I'm not one of those people. I've just always been a kind of mess. Maybe it's the clutter on the outside that gives me some kind of clarity in what I'm thinking, and clean, organized spaces can sometimes make me feel uncomfortable. Although I would say with some of my still lives, something that is most striking about them is the kind of organization of them, and it gives it the clutter a kind of organization that that also sort of brings this kind of calm. When I look at a cluttered space, I feel calm. But a lot of people, when they see that cluttered space, they feel uncomfortable and this sort of loud cacophony. So maybe I kind of work with both things within my work. Yeah. Did that answer that question?
Yeah, I think so. Okay, Kari's asking, you mentioned the idea of a third person inside of you making the work. And the work is what happens when you give that person tools to create. If I heard that right, could you please elaborate?
Okay, so so I guess my idea is like, well, let's say I wasn't me and I was just a regular person, but I needed to have something in my life, whether, so like I often used to tell the story about this need that I had when I was a child. I really wanted to have a dog. And my parents wouldn't let me have the dog. So I went, instead of belly aching about it, I just went into the garage. I got some nails and some wood, and I hammered together a dog out of wood. And I put a little leash on it and sort of dragged it around the neighborhood, took it for a walk, fed it some water, let it sleep on my bed. And I did that for a day. I don't even think it was memorable by my parents or anybody. Nobody knew that I had made this dog. But once I had made the dog, I sort of got it out of my system. And it was kind of like, that was all I needed. I didn't really actually need a dog. Just any way that I could get a dog was good enough. And so I was thinking about this third person as, you have a need for something. You don't have a car. How would you go about making a car? If you don't have a bicycle or a means to get to where you're going, how are you going to make something that will get you to where you want to go? Whatever you have a need for, it might be a simple thing where you need a cup. How are you going to make a cup? And given whatever resources that you have, and whatever skills that you have, how would you go about making those things? So I'm actually, I guess, conceptualizing sometimes, I need to make an American flag, and because this will give me kind of meaning in my life. I have some cardboard and some acrylic paints, and this is how I'm gonna do it. So I guess that's what I meant by this sort of third person. A lot of the things that I make look like they're kind of naive, or even the still lives, it's questionable, like who made them. They're kind of sophisticated to be the working of a child who is just playing with things, and they're kind of stupid in a way that maybe they're not as smart as art should be. So who made this thing? Who put it together? What is it? Is it art? Is it not art? Is it, so I like just bringing up these questions and wondering about them with my work. So.
Kristen, this has been magical. I want to respect that it's 7:45 for you.
Sure.
I don't want to wear you out. I guess if anybody has a burning question, we could take one more, but mostly I just want to say how nice it's been to hear, and lots of people are posting in the chat about how great it's been. So we all see a lot of artist lectures, and they're not all this special. So I just want to say thanks for that. And somebody out there, what's the best way to clap remotely for Kristen? We really appreciate it.
Thanks for coming. I'm glad to see you all.
Yay, thank you.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you, Kristen.
That was amazing.
Good night, everybody.
All right.
All right. Night.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Peter.
Bye,
Peter.
Kristen.
Bye, Kristen.
Bye.
Good to see
Bye.
you.
Bye, kids. Miss you too.
Hi, Peter.
Hey, Arthur. What's up, Derek? Hey, Nathan.
Bye, Derek.
Hi, Peter.
Bye and bye, everyone.
Good night, Mary Ellen.